Scott's back there. Call the regular Pleasant City Commission meeting.
Pleasant City!
Pleasant Ridge City.
It's Pleasant.
Thank you. Now you've got me completely. Call the Pleasant Ridge City Commission meeting of Tuesday, January 15th, 2019 to order. May we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to hand it over to you. Amy, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Carey?
Here.
Commissioner Scott?
Here.
Commissioner Krzysiak?
Here.
Commissioner Wall?
Here.
Mayor Metzger?
Here, all here. First item on the agenda, public discussions, items not on the agenda. If there's anything to bring forward, please do so at this time. Go ahead, Amy. Get your name and your address.
Good evening. I'm Amy Butters. I live at 23 Millington.
Welcome,
and
Amy.
how are all of you
We are
tonight?
Good, thank you.
Happy New Year again.
Happy New Year.
I'm here for my annual presentation on the Ferndale Schools Ferndale Fine Arts Booster Raffle.
Oh.
And so here I have in my hand raffle tickets that I'm selling for $10 each. This is a fundraiser that Fine Arts Boosters, which is FAB for short, does every year. It's our only fundraiser that we do for the students and programs of the Ferndale School District, and specifically for fine arts programs to supplement some of the programming that they do at the school. Some examples are, we help pay for the concert attire that the kids wear at their concerts. We have just made a donation to complete a purchase for a trailer that is going to be used to transport instruments, orchestra instruments, for when they go different places for performances that they do away from the school. That's another thing that FAB does. We've helped a lot of different organizations throughout the years, and of course we depend on fundraisers and support from the community, all different community members. So that's why I'm here to let you know about this fundraiser again this year, and to pass along to everybody out there listening and watching. $10 each. The first prize is $2,000.
Nice.
The second prize is $1,000. The third prize is $500. The drawing is Saturday, February 2nd at 4 o'clock, and that is during our all-city concert, which is an annual event at Ferndale Schools, where the choir, the orchestra, and the band all perform. It's in the gym. It's a big concert that it's a great opportunity for all the families of the community and all the families of the district to go see our great fine arts programs that our schools put on. So I encourage you to come to that. That's when the drawing will be, and of course we will be selling tickets all day that day, but you can also buy tickets from me, or you can also go online and you can purchase tickets online. And if you go to the district website, which is ferndaleschools.org, and when you go to the Fine Arts tab, then it goes down to the Fine Arts Boosters tab, and there's a link on there where you can purchase your ticket. They're $10 each. Again, like I say, you do not need to be present to win. And we have a past winner right here in our midst, right? Commissioner Krzysiak. So, yes, I encourage you to spread the word, let everyone know that it's a great cause. It's the fine arts are a big part of Ferndale School District. So we love to support them. Also, just a little piggyback, I would like to spread the word about another opportunity for Pleasant Ridgers to help out with our school district. Finals are coming up at the high school. So there is a parent at the school who is heading up a drive for bottled water, snacks, mints, that kind of thing for the students during finals. I will put a link to her sign up, maybe on the Facebook group the city Facebook group, and then that could be a
put it
way.
up there.
Barb
Did she already? Oh, okay.
But-
So
keep
I'm
it
happy
fresh.
to give
Fresh.
Yeah.
point people to that
Yeah.
direction because it's really, I know a lot of times people ask me, what can we do to help the schools? We don't have kids at the schools, but we still want to be, supportive. And this is another really, like if you're not into buying raffle tickets, you can donate a case of water or something like that. And they're taking those donations at the school, the high school office.
Cool.
So that's another, look for that link. Barb put it up, so.
Yep.
I think that's all, unless
Wonderful.
any questions?
That's great.
Are you gonna stay through the end of the meeting so we can buy tickets?
I can, yeah. It's going to be a short meeting, right?
Well, you can call the
No,
meeting.
I am completely happy to stay and make some transactions. That would be
There you go.
fantastic.
There you go.
Any other questions?
And anybody out there watching that wants to come running in, they can.
Yeah, there's still time. I'll be
Plenty
here.
of time. She'll be here all night, folks.
All right.
Sitting back there with her.
The commission, you are always very supportive of the school district. I appreciate that, and it's good seeing you guys. I need to come more often. Okay.
Amy, when is FE out?
Pardon?
When's FE
Oh,
out?
I don't know the date on that, but I'll try to keep you in the loop on that. I know you love that event. Yes.
Usually they've done it in March or April.
Yeah,
March or April.
last year was April.
Last year was April.
Yeah.
Okay.
That you're loopy enough.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Moving on. No other governmental reports. Chief.
Usually I defer to my distinguished colleague at the fire, but since it's his first time here, he asked me to go first so he could see how you scare him off. You might scare him off. Good evening, everybody, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Really not a whole lot to report, pretty much status quo in Pleasant Ridge, other than we hired, he's not here tonight, he's not working, we'll get him working for the next meeting, another part-time officer. Dan Simon is his name. He retired September, October from the city of Ferndale as a sergeant there. That long time, grew up in the area, lives in the area in Ferndale. Smooth transition so far. In fact, he's pretty much after we did
Wait,
on
did
his
he
own.
come? Did he come last commission meeting?
Nope, that was probably
That was
Officer Waters.
Who also grew up around here, right?
Yes.
Okay, just one.
Yes, we're trying to recruit
Locals.
homebound
great.
locals to come here and work in Pleasant Ridge. So we'll have him available hopefully for the next meeting to introduce him all to you. Other than that, we expect to have our new patrol car, the Tahoe that we purchased on this year's budget. It might be back this week. The company we use to outfit it, local, Canfield, promised a 2-week turnaround. It's typically, sometimes we waited 2 or 3 months in the past. So we'll hope to have that and on display. A nice new shiny patrol vehicle that you guys all
Nice.
paid. Other than that, I don't really have a whole lot. And I'll defer to my distinguished colleague for his first time.
Could I ask
Sure.
one question? And it actually goes toward traffic calming later, I guess. But as I was driving down Woodward, I saw that the truck had been stopped on Woodward Heights,
Okay.
and I didn't know if that was because it wasn't supposed to be there, or if there was something, if it was speeding or something like that. I don't know. Or if
There's
this was
several
a-
officers working right now. I know he mentioned that he had somebody.
Truck enforcement.
Why he stopped him, I don't know, but we
Okay. I didn't know if
continue
we were doing truck enforcement.
to do that, which we can address later. I'm well prepared for that.
Okay, good.
Okay?
Okay,
All right. Cool.
welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jack Pichet, Fire Marshal, City of Ferndale. Just been given the role of acting chief as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure you all know that Chief Sullivan's recovering from a medical emergency. That happened back in November. He's at home now, recovering, doing a lot of physical therapy, hoping to get back to work. I just wanted to introduce myself today. I have to apologize for not being here sooner. It was pretty hectic the first few weeks, plus the holidays, so the adjustments made, now things are smoothing out, but it's still quite a busy schedule. Just want to let you know that I'm looking forward to working with all of you and serving the community.
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
appreciate you coming.
Thanks.
All of you.
Anytime. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I pop up right?
Yes,
I'm
you
just gonna
may.
do my stuff right now too. I think it's
Yes, you may.
just a couple things that I I have, good evening, Happy New Year. I was supposed to tell Amanda what the Recreation Commission meeting is typically the last Wednesday of January, April, July, and October, but I'm going to be at the Michigan Parks and Recreation Conference in Kalamazoo, so we're going to move the meeting to the next week, the week of the 4th. It'll be either that Tuesday or Wednesday. So just keep your eye on the website and we'll have that date. As you guys all know, you were at the community center earlier this evening, and the room is 98% done now. It's
Beautiful.
spectacular. Please come by and see. We'll show you all the bells and whistles and all the fun stuff that's in there. So we look forward to people being able to use that to its fullest, and we're excited for the summer because it'll really change how that space is used, especially with the new overhead door. One quick thing that, why would I be giving this during recreation part, is for recycling in the city. So Sakura has a new, on their website, it's called a Waste Wizard, and they also have an app that you can download on your phone, iPhone or Android, and it's pretty cool. You go on the website, type in what you want to get rid of, whether it's you want to recycle it, throw it away, or whatever. Like, type in batteries, and it will, as you're typing it, it'll populate a list. It'll say batteries, rechargeable, disposable, car batteries, like all the kinds. You click on it, and then it will tell you what to do with it. Whether you can put it in your bin, whether it's safe to just put it in the trash, whether you should drop it off for household, hazardous things like that. So it's pretty intuitive. So I mean, we get a lot of questions about that. So now you just, you can go on your computer or download that app, and it's pretty handy. So make sure you check that out. And I was talking to Sergeant Reed. I don't even know if I mentioned anything to the chief yet, but I just Commissioner Perry had said to me earlier about a Ring doorbell at her house.
Yes.
So I've been in contact with the people at Ring and some other companies that offer these doorbells that have video on them. So their Ring has a new program called Neighborhoods, where everybody can, like, in an area can log in, and you can send a video to this neighborhood, like of something that may have been shady or off color, so, and you can say, hey, saw someone strange walking down the street, and then you put the video on there. So you can go on this map and see all these like things populating about where people were, or I had a package thrown off my porch and here's the guy. So I contacted them to see if there's a way that like the police can have a better login to that, like something that's going to be able to let us dig down to some more data, or be able to send like special messages about this, like saying, hey, we know there's a guy out there doing this, and to be able to put that. So they're actually looking into that, and they're another company that's working with them for like larger scale, like camera type systems for buildings and like intersections where you have like lots of problems.
Yeah.
He's actually contacting me and possibly send me out some demo units to be able to look. So I know we had some spots that we were talking about that we wanted to over by the school and whatnot, and now the technology has come where like 10 of these cameras can hook up to one cellular and be able to send the video all the time. So it was kind of our issue that there's no network connection. So just something that I was talking with them about. It just intrigued me, this little neighborhoods app. It was kind of cool. So
That is cool.
at that same point, he said that he might be able to offer like some discount coupons for the Ring doorbells for people to get them, and that way, if more people that have them, the more of this like neural net you can get and have a lot of stuff covered. So it's kind of like a slow process because I'm dealing with these guys in South Dakota and over here and whatnot, and then I'm going to talk with the police about it. So just kind of wanted to touch base. So that's kind of something that's out there that might come about. So
That'd be great.
all right,
Thank you.
that's it for me. Thank you.
Yeah. Scott, excuse me.
Yep.
I really want to appreciate the time you took before the meeting to walk the commission through, particularly the community center. I think we all agree that it's fabulous, and especially the new meeting room looks really great. One thing that you emphasized that I think might be worth relaying to the rest of the residents is that if you see something in the exercise room in particular, please bring that to Scott's attention, Shawnee's attention, because what we saw tonight, I think, was a lot of functioning equipment and things that some of them obviously had some natural wear, but overall I think we would agree that it was in pretty good condition. And Scott emphasized to us that if it's an issue on a particular piece, please bring that attention because we can address it. If it's not brought up, then it can't be addressed, or maybe it slips through the cracks. So
Absolutely.
that was definitely one thing I wanted to relay. But also, we didn't get a chance. I wanted to talk a little bit earlier, but the dog park. I've had some residents inquire, like, how are we looking at the dog park as far as the gates and the functionality of the gates, and for going into the spring and summer season.
Right. So we have the new access pass at the far end, the dead end of Kensington, and then we have the old legacy cards at the Indiana. So we were there. It's kind of like a two-prong attack that we were leaving them the way they are right now because we're giving people time to come in and get their card changed out. Like if you're a resident, it's easy because you probably already have a fob. It's the same one you use at the Wellness Center. You're just going to use over there, and we can just click a button on the computer and add that membership to you. If you're a non-resident, you're going to have to come in and exchange your card for one of the fobs. So we were giving people a chance to be able to do that. Also, I need to have the reader at the other gate. I need to have a physical wire from the new gate run all the way to the old gate. So I had a guy that does our electrician work for us. They're going to come in and bore bury a line for us, but he can't do it right now because of the cold. So he was actually going to come out just before Thanksgiving, and we got like a weird cold spell right then when we usually don't. But so as soon as the ground is okay for us to dig that wire, we're going to do it, and then once that happens, it's literally just hooking it up because everything's already in place. It's just going to hook to the new box and go. So once that happens, both of them will be on the new system, and we'll flow from there. If you're the residents use their current card, the yellow, they have a yellow or a blue one. The non-residents, we're giving it's a lime green card, so we can tell it pretty easily. Like if somebody said, I tried to get in the wellness center and it didn't work, and it's like, well, you got a lime green card, it's a non-resident dog pass, you're not able to get in the so it's easy. It's easy for us to differentiate that we know it's we know that we know that it shouldn't have any other membership privileges on there other than a dog run. So it seems to have been working out pretty good over there. I have one time we had an issue over there. It was an internet connection over there because it runs off of like a cellular. It needs to have an internet connection so we can update. And we got it fixed in 10-15 minutes. And if it is a problem, we just can shut it off and let the gate be open.
Okay.
So that's the nice part about it. And if we lose power or something like that, the gate is it's called a fail safe, so it unlocks. Just like the doors at the community center, they don't lock. There's some that when you lose power, they lock,
Right.
and then just you either can't get out or you got to go through an egress door. These are fail safes where if you lose power, they just unlock, so everyone's able to get out. So,
Excellent.
okay,
Yeah. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to the next item, City Commission Liaison Reports. We'll start with Commissioner Wall and the Recreation Commission.
Okay, so we just heard Scott say the next meeting will be the 2nd or the 3rd?
The week of the 4th.
The week of the 4th?
Or the-
Oh, the week of the 4th, that Tuesday or Wednesday?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, and I will give you updates. Okay, this Thursday, movie of the month, Little Women, shown at 12:15 and 6:15. Free programs on Thursday, January 24th. Computer class 10 a.m. to noon, must pre-register. Fago presentation 7 p.m. No registration required. It seems like that will be really fun. Thursday, February 7th, Masonic Temple tour and lunch. February 8th, Daddy Daughter Dance at 6:30. You need to register for that. Wednesday, February 27th, Little Caesars Arena tour and lunch. And yes, spring summer youth sports registration's underway. Call Shani to get your players signed up. God, can't believe this already. Summer staff hiring, camp staff, and lifeguard deadline is 3/8.
Can't be soon enough.
Applications are online. Drop off to the rec center. And I think that's about it. A bit too short. That's a wrap.
That was good. That's
Okay,
good.
good. Succinct. Who's next?
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Krzysiak, Ferndale Public Schools.
Thank you, Mayor. And Amy, be sure to, correct me if you hear anything or want to add anything.
I'm sure you'll get it all right.
Okay. So here we go. This is from the superintendent. The strategic plan for Ferndale Schools expired in 2018. They began the process last year of writing a 5-year plan. They want to incorporate stakeholder involvement. So they've asked for stakeholders from different groups, 15 to 20, to serve on a committee who will help write the 5-year strategic plan. So some of these positions that they're looking for: 1 parent from each of the 7 schools, 2 high school students. The rest are administrative and teaching and the unions. So all the stakeholders would come together. So if you're a parent or a student who would like to participate in that, you can volunteer online at strategic, or you can send an email to strategicplanning@ferndaleschools.org. And they're going to begin that on January 26th. So if you want to participate in that, please send your application or your intent to them before that date. There's also a new principal, Seth Petty. He's a new principal at Ferndale Middle School, and there'll be a new principal meet and greet. This will be Thursday, January 31st, beginning at 6 p.m. in the FHS Nest, and everyone is welcome to go meet Mr. Petty at his new position as principal of Ferndale Middle School. The December 17th school board meeting also opened with a Butters. This Butters was Zoe. She's the student liaison to the school board at Ferndale High School, and she informed all in residence about the Winter Voices concert, which was a resounding success. Talked about Spirit Week and how Ferndale was hosting the Motor City Roundball Classic over the Christmas break. I don't have an update on how that went, but Zoe was really excited about that. Zoe was also selling tickets that evening.
She was.
Yeah, she was. I told her the same thing I told you. I'll get you next time. No, but I'm gonna get those
Get you next
tickets.
time.
I got you. I won a lot of money that time. That was very nice. Sydney Embry, she's the student representative liaison at University High School, and she talked about some of the charitable efforts that the students at UHS are participating in. Ronald McDonald House, Gleaners, and the student body came up with a pledge to give not just during the holiday season, but throughout the year. So they're very proud of that effort. There also was Bridget Tweedle and Lydia McKee, United Student Assembly at FHS. They talked about the canned food drive for Renaissance Church Food Pantry, Adopt a Family, which was very successful, and they had a penny wars at the high school. They raised $350 to help pay for gifts for the community over the holiday season.
That's cool.
Yeah, they were really proud of that, and they should be. The Superintendent Excellence Award. This is a beautiful award given every month to a student who the superintendent recognizes as exemplifying the spirit of Ferndale School District. This one it was very sweet. It went to a brother and sister, Brittany and Brandon Nichols. Their brother and sister. Brittany was described as a natural leader, always assisting her fellow students, and Brandon was described as a great young man who represents Ferndale High School at OAA meetings. So they got the Superintendent's Excellence Award. Eagle of the Month is a similar award, but for the teachers. This went for the Ferndale Middle School math teachers, Mike Siegler and Nate Austin. They helped ease a difficult transition in the math department, and they're recognized for that. Building Pride this month was Ferndale Upper Elementary, and Katie Jeffrey gave an update on what's going on at Fuel. They talked about high quality instruction, intervention, and enrichment groups. These happen throughout 6 to 8 week cycles at Fuel. It's smaller group size. They target student needs based on test scores and class performance. It's one-on-one support, so it's really where the teachers can interact with their pupils who are maybe struggling in one subject or another. They work with partners, but they also have independent work. They do book clubs during the week. They have guided reading. So it's just a nice school culture of learning that's going on at Fuel right now. And Miss Jeffrey was really proud to talk about that. So the next school board meeting is actually tonight's school board meeting. It's being held right now. They're probably still going. But they had to move theirs because of the holiday schedule and the Martin Luther King upcoming holiday. So their January meeting is taking place right now. Their next one will be February 25th, Monday. That's the third Monday of the month is their regularly scheduled meeting. The 25th, 7 p.m. at the Media Center. And the last, I always love this part of the meeting. It's the Eagles Points of Pride, and it's where each board member just highlights something over the course of the month that struck them as representing the district. And Jim O'Donnell mentioned the boys basketball team as his point of pride. They only had 6 players to dress, which means they only had 1 player on the bench, and they were able to still beat Birmingham Groves, which was very impressive. So Jim highlighted that, and it was a very good meeting, and I think there's a lot of enthusiasm for the remainder of the school year. And that's all I have, man.
Something tells me the Birmingham Groves high school team will not be honored by you.
No, they probably are not the point of pride this year.
Thanks. Commissioner Perry, Planning DDA.
Thank you, Mayor. The Planning Commission and DDA has not met since did not meet since the last City Commission meeting, but they are going to meet on Monday, January 28th, 7 p.m. right here. The only news I have from them, which I don't know if the city manager wants to talk about it now or later, but unfortunately, and Amy Butters actually broke this news to me, was that the Chariot program has been discontinued, unfortunately. It's something that Ford discontinued as a whole program nationally, or however broad it was. And so, yeah, we're very disappointed. I mean, people who had ridden it tended to really enjoy like that solution for transportation. So it is too bad, but I know the Planning Commission and DDA and the city will continue to look for good solutions for, transportation and everything for the residents. So hopefully we'll see you Monday, January 28th, 7 p.m. right here for the Planning Commission and DDA at City Hall. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Scott, Historical Commission. You had a question?
Well, I was just going to ask, I know we talked about, and I think Amy even asked about the numbers.
It's good
I mean, that's so great you're here. Who knew Amy
Amy's
Butters?
the reference.
But can we expect numbers, or did we get numbers back on ridership or things of that nature?
Yeah, so Ferndale shared some of them with me. Ferndale is the contracting entity since they were paying the bulk of the cost, so they had the relationship with Chariot. But as far as numbers goes, the Hessel Park stop was still the most used one in the entire system.
Oh, wow.
That and then 9 in Woodward, as you would expect, was the other highest stop. So, I think we had a pretty good share of the total rides coming from Pleasant Ridge. The actual brewery stop was up there too. A consistent one. Interestingly, there was a lot more pickups at Hessel Park than there were drop-offs. So it seems that people probably charioted down and then probably Ubered home after Chariot was running.
Or walked.
At the end of the night.
Or walked.
Yeah. So that was, we're surmising on the patterns there. Those are just some quick numbers that we had to share. The ridership started off higher in the warm weather months, and then it kind of tapered as the weather got colder. And we were we were definitely disappointed because the whole purpose for Ferndale doing this was to mitigate the construction of the parking deck.
Right.
So they were kind of running it early to get people used to it, and then they were really expecting it to help them during their parking deck construction. So now they're out on a limb trying to figure out alternate arrangements for moving people around their downtown while that's going on. But yeah, it's unfortunate. It was a nice service for us to be able to offer.
Right.
Do you see there being any alternative type thing to that? Because I know we had been looking at a whole trolley thing before.
Right. We had been working through a number of options with Ferndale. Buying our own vehicle, running our own
Managing
system,
the whole system.
partnering with Smart. None of them made financial sense, basically, when you got down to the end of the day. Even partnering with Smart to do a microtransit that was piggybacking on their existing infrastructure, it was cost prohibitive. So I don't know. But we'll keep working at it.
Groovy.
Want to start a jitney service? It's always possible. Hey, entrepreneurial.
That's right.
Commissioner Scott, historical.
Just a couple of quick items. The Historical Commission will have a special meeting, a workshop on the 6th to introduce the new members of the commission to the museum. Some of them have not actually seen the museum yet. It's just a lot of cool artifacts that are there, so that meeting will occur. And then the next meeting will be on March 6th, the regular meeting. And you'll probably be hearing from some Historical Commission members over the next weeks as they begin to spool up the activity around the Home and Garden Tour, which is moved to September this year. So it'll be just a much warmer, better time of the year to have the event. I think people will really enjoy it after all of the other activities are out of the way
That'll be fun.
for the summer. And that's it. Oh, quick thanks to Ms. Howard for being our chairman on the Historical Commission, to everyone else that has accepted an office this year.
Great, thank you. Any other items? Anybody forget? Okay. Move on to the consent agenda. We have 5 items, and just to mention, one is a resolution in honor of the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., and the other is proclamation recognizing January as Volunteer Blood Donor Month. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mayor, I move the consent agenda be approved.
So support?
A second.
Any discussion? Right, Amy, can we have a vote, please?
Commissioner Wall?
Yes.
Commissioner Perry?
Yes.
Commissioner Krzysiak?
Yes.
Commissioner Scott?
Yes?
Mayor Metzger?
Yes, consent agenda is approved. Next item, overview of Proposal 18-1, the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act. Jim?
Thank you. As you recall, we discussed this in a little bit of detail last month, whether or not we should adopt a resolution or begin the process of preparing an ordinance to deal with the new issue of recreational marijuana that's before us. At that meeting, it was decided that Greg and I would put together a more comprehensive and detailed overview of the new Recreational Marijuana Act, termed the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act. This was enacted by the voters in November as a ballot initiative. So,
It does calm traffic.
it does come.
Slows it down.
Good one. Sorry, I had to.
You want to tell us from personal experience? If you, I want to try this out. Calm, slowed everything.
There we go. So just to start with first things first, there are some things in the act that local municipalities can decide how we want to handle. There's other things that are and we can't touch. So the act permits persons in Michigan to possess, use, consume, purchase, transport, or process 2.5 ounces or less of marijuana, of which not more than 15 grams may be in the form of marijuana concentrate. And then not more than 10 ounces of marijuana, which is a very large amount of marijuana. Any marijuana produced by marijuana plants cultivated on the premises, and for one's personal use, up to 12 plants on one's premise, basically at your home. You can give away up to 2.5 ounces of marijuana, except not more than 15 grams of marijuana may be in the form of concentrate to a person who's 21 years of age or older, as long as the transfer is not advertised or promoted to the public. So don't go on Craigslist. Assist another person who is 21 years of age or more in any of the acts described above, or to use, manufacture, possess, and purchase marijuana accessories and distribute or sell marijuana accessories to persons who are 21 years of age and older. These are all consistent with how how I believe that the ballot initiative was promoted to the voters. The kind of the one sentence line was, "We're going to treat marijuana like alcohol," and that's, I think, where the 21 years of age or older comes into play. And these are the things that we can't regulate. These are allowed. What it prohibits, a small type here, but you can't operate a vehicle under the influence of marijuana. You can't transfer to persons under the age of 21. Limitations on resin extraction, talks about flashpoints and other things that I don't understand, but they're all in the act. Consume marijuana in a public place, and there's an asterisk there. Or smoke marijuana where prohibited by a property owner. This is one thing that municipalities can do, is we can designate public smoking or public marijuana use areas as long as persons under the age of 21 are not allowed in those areas. So this is probably a special event type of event where you might be having the beer garden and then maybe the marijuana garden next door, where you have to control that, limit access, and police that. Cultivate marijuana plants where visible from a public place by the naked eye. Possess or consume marijuana at a public or private school, on a school bus, or a correctional facility. Not sure why someone 21 years or older would be on a school bus, so I guess this is school drivers.
They got held back a lot of time.
And then anything greater than 2.5 ounces of marijuana that's within a residence has to be stored in a locked container or area. So those are just out there. We can't touch those. We just have to deal with those. What we can do, and what we do need to decide how we're going to address, is marijuana establishments. And by establishments, we mean businesses. And the Act establishes a series of types of business. So we have growers, which is a person licensed to cultivate marijuana and sell or otherwise transfer marijuana to marijuana establishments. So this is your producer. Marijuana Safety Compliance Facility. This is a person licensed to test marijuana, including certification for potency in the presence of contaminants. We have a marijuana processor, and that's a person licensed to obtain marijuana from establishments, to process and package it, and then to sell or otherwise transfer it to marijuana establishments. You have micro businesses. This is a person that's licensed to cultivate not more than 150 marijuana plants. I'm not sure how micro of a business that is, but that's how it's defined. And they may also process and package marijuana, sell or otherwise transfer marijuana to persons who are 21 years of age or older, to a marijuana safety compliance facility, but not to other marijuana establishments. So I guess this is like your craft grower. Micro marijuana.
It's Valentine's.
Okay.
Pop up,
Yes.
Valentine's and Urban Rest and
Yes.
Okay.
whatever else may be. Marijuana retailer. This is a person licensed to obtain marijuana from other establishments and to sell or otherwise transfer it to individuals or other establishments who are 21 years of age or older. We have secure transporters. These are persons who, as you may guess, transport marijuana from one establishment to another. And then there's a catch-all, any other type of business licensed by the state. Not defined in the Act, but presumably there may be some other categories that become necessary or over time reveal themselves. So, Greg, you want to take it from here?
Sure. Can I do it from here or?
Wherever you want to.
To answer the first question, we do know how to spell marijuana.
I asked that when I first saw
The
it.
H is there because the first federal statute back in the 30s, the 1930s, spelled it with an H, and it's carried forward since then. So it's like that in the other state laws and now in this initiative. Under the statute, The licensing agency is LARA, the same agency that licenses professions throughout Michigan, as well as the municipal marijuana operations. The statute gives them 1 year to promulgate rules, which means the whole process for how to decide standards for applicants, the process by which they'll be reviewed, and then ultimately licensed to be issued. And applications will be made to LARA, the state agency. They have 1 year to promulgate the rules. If they do not, then individuals that want to operate a marijuana business can make applications to the city or any local municipality. It's anticipated that LARA will fulfill their obligations, but the rules and regulations for the Medicinal Marijuana Act took quite a while to work their way through the process. So that's something that we'll have to wait and see what happens. The statute, let me back up a second. There are a lot of issues with this statute, and Jim has a slide entitled Unanswered Questions. So I don't have the answers to the unanswered questions. But there are a lot of issues, we'll get through some of them tonight, based upon the wording of the statute and experience in other states that have legalized marijuana. It's anticipated that there will be a lot of litigation that will be enacted or filed almost immediately in some of the other states to clarify some of these areas of the law. So we don't have a lot of answers today, and in a lot of cases we're going to have to wait for the courts to rule on a lot of these. With a lot of statutes, it can be amended or tweaked by the legislature. And that happened. The zoning statutes, the planning statutes, when they were initially adopted, there needed to be a lot of technical changes, and those worked their way through the regular legislative process. Because this was a citizen-initiated legislation, it can only be amended by a 3/4 vote of both houses of the legislature. So it's not only a supermajority, but a super majority. So legislative fixes to some of these issues may not be forthcoming because of that requirement. So with that, you can decide whether to allow these establishments or not. You can opt out, which means prohibit them entirely. You can opt in, which would allow them, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Unlike the medicinal marijuana law, though, if you do nothing, you in effect have opted in. Under the other statute, the medicinal marijuana statute, you have to affirmatively agree to allow those establishments within your community. That's not the case here. If you do nothing, then the state will license them, and if you do nothing and don't have an ordinance, then basically all control of the operations will be in the hands of the regulators, LARA up in Lansing. You can limit the number of establishments, and one of the areas of the law that's not really clear is if you decide to opt in and allow them and establish a numerical limit, well, what happens if you have more applicants, state applicants, than you have slots allocated? You are required to go through a competitive process. The statute doesn't say what that process is. How you're supposed to decide among competing applicants, those are things that would have to be worked out through experience or possibly through a legislative amendment, but again, that's very, very difficult to do. So then we have a lot of areas that will require experience or litigation to resolve. The first is, if we do decide to opt in, do we regulate under a general licensing type ordinance, the zoning ordinance, which is typically what we use to regulate land use, or both? It is not clear under the initiative whether whether these kinds of facilities can be regulated through the zoning ordinance. The statute speaks to regulating the time, place, and manner, among other things, of marijuana establishments. That's not zoning. Zoning is far more comprehensive than that. So that's one, if the city does decide to take action, that would be one of the areas that we need to address. How does the municipality manage a competitive process? There is no guidance, or very little guidance in the statute as to how that's supposed to happen. Jim ran through the list of establishments. There's a question as to whether we opt in. Can we opt in for some? Or if we opt in, do we have to opt in for all? Again, the legislation is not clear. The municipal league takes the position that you cannot pick and choose. If you opt in, you have to allow at least some of all. I'm not sure that's correct. That's a fairly conservative approach, but again, that's one of those issues that would have to be resolved down the line. And finally, this whole question of what constitutes unreasonably impractical. And if you go to the next slide. The statute says that we can regulate certain areas, and Jim highlighted some of them as well as the licensing, but these ordinances may not be unreasonably impracticable. And when you take a look at the definition, that is something that has a great degree of subjectivity, and there will almost certainly be litigation when somebody is denied an ordinance, or I'm sorry, denied approval by a local ordinance and challenges it on those grounds. And again, we don't know what that means. There's the guidance in the statute is still somewhat vague, and therefore the only way that's going to get resolved is either through a supermajority vote of the legislature, which is unlikely, or future litigation. When Jim had the slide before that talked about what this new act prohibits, another ambiguity is that the statute doesn't exactly say that these items are prohibited. Rather, it says that the statute does not authorize, use by individuals under 21 on a school bus, et cetera, et cetera. So there may be a need, to regulate that as well. Again, another issue that's not yet resolved. What the statute specifically does allow is reasonable restrictions on signage, regulation of the time, place, and manner of operations, allow sales and use in age-restricted areas. Another area where this act overrides local control to a point is that you can have a local ordinance, but unlike our typical ordinances where you can decide between misdemeanors and civil infractions, under the act, violations of a local ordinance have to be civil infractions with a penalty not to exceed $500. We can, if we choose, to opt in to adopt an ordinance that will require municipal licenses, a local license in addition to the license through the state. But any municipal license can't conflict with the rules, the state rules and regulations. So we cannot forbid something through a local licensing process that the state would allow. We can charge a fee, but we are limited to an annual fee of not more than $5,000 per establishment. And even if we opt out, we still must allow the transportation through the city of marijuana through our license, through someone that possesses the appropriate license. So you can't tell them to stop on Woodward Avenue and go around. You have to allow whether or not you opt in or opt out. That kind of summarizes the municipalities, local control, licensing, etc. Before we get to taxation, anybody have any questions on what I've gone through? It's either very clear or very confusing. So with that, we can go on. Oh.
No, I would just say, and you clarified this earlier, and I appreciate you clarifying it because it was a misconception that I had reading through the law, was that the ability for us to zone specifically for these type of establishments, we don't have that.
The statute talks about time, place, and manner, which is a different concept than regulations through zoning.
Okay.
Which goes beyond necessarily time, place, and manner.
Yeah. But your opinion as kind of, and this is kind of the uncertainty that we're living in right now regarding this act, our ability, this body, to pass an ordinance that simply restricted these type of establishments to a particular zone that we've established, we do or we would not have that power?
We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. Is that regulating time, place, and manner? Maybe, maybe not.
Okay.
The argument against it is that if it was intended for communities to use the zoning power to regulate these, they could clearly have said that in the statute, and it doesn't say that. Rather, it relates back to that less less detailed language of time, place, and manner.
Okay.
And to
Yeah.
to expand on that, we don't know. And the way that that gets resolved is that somebody adopts that ordinance, and then there's a lawsuit, and then it goes through the court process, and then at the end of that, we know. So whoever adopts that ordinance, or whatever consortium of communities, band together to do that, bears the cost of finding that answer for us.
And to get a final answer, generally mean going to the Supreme Court, and that can take several years to resolve these kinds of issues. There's one other thing that I did want to mention, in that you can opt in or opt out, but the statute also has a mechanism for citizen initiative, where petitions are filed in a sufficient number, then the question is put on the ballot, or the ordinance is put on the ballot. So you can opt in, that can be overridden, or either way, it can be overridden if through that petition initiative and referendum process.
Yeah, and just if I could, just to clarify for our residents, because this was something that I knew our charter, right, and some of the conversation on this with Greg as far as explaining the landscape here, our charter actually enables our residents to get issues on the ballot if they meet a certain requirement as far as signatures and time. Amy's very familiar with that process. But this, as the law was written and voted in, it actually is a lower threshold. So the state, or our charter, excuse me, it's 15% of voters in the last gubernatorial election. This law, the state of Michigan, the law that we're living under right now, is only 5%. So, and we were going through some of the numbers. In November, we had 1,796 voters for governor. 5% of that is 90 signatures. So it would take, however this body decides, this was very revealing to me, regardless of what this body decides, a resident for or against could put this on the ballot if they were to achieve the 90 signature threshold. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
You could have two questions on the ballot, one pro, one...
Yeah, that's what I was, I don't know if there's precedent for that, or how you would just have two separate questions, one for, one against, and then, okay.
Greg? Sorry. Yeah. Just another clarification. I'd imagine the state has not established the number of licenses that it intends to issue and how it will distribute them. So there's some possibility that we might not even get any. If we use liquor as an example,
certainly that's possible.
They might distribute them to favor certain cities or populations over others.
Well, if there's the state liquor law establishes quotas by communities. I mean, here you can set your own quota if that's what you choose to do, certainly. But the way I read the statute is, the state regulators will come up with their criteria and standards, and then I think they would give licenses to whoever qualifies under their criteria, subject to whatever limits that a community might place.
Understood.
Okay. Good. All right. So taxes. This is probably everything that we've heard most about why we might want to allow for marijuana establishments is because there are taxes on those. So the statute establishes a 10% excise tax on sales at retailer and micro business establishments to the public, to the end consumer. There are no taxes on sales between marijuana establishments. So when the retailer purchases their stock from the processor or the grower, that's not taxed. Only end sales to the consumer. So those taxes are collected by the state and placed in a separate fund. It's siloed from the state general fund. And then what happens is those tax revenues are used by the state to defray administration and enforcement costs. So LARA will figure out how much they're spending. We don't know what that's going to be. But to administer and enforce the act at the state level. Until 2022, or for at least 2 years, $20 million annually is earmarked for research for the use of marijuana to treat veterans' issues and to prevent veterans' suicide. So, worthy cost there. But that's for 2 years. And then after that, there's a formula for the distribution of the remainder of the funds. And that's 15% to counties and 15% to municipalities, distributed in proportion to the number of retailers and micro businesses within the jurisdiction to the total number within the state. So the important thing to clarify there is retailers and micro businesses. If we were to opt in and all we got was a compliance facility and a grower, and we would get no tax revenue at all. Even though with a grower you have highly valuable material, and there's security, and there's some other impacts that come along with that business has to do, and that may impact policing costs because of that business being in the community, but we would get no benefit from it. That's an unknown. And then the remainder of the fund is 35% to the school aid fund and 35% to the road fund. So what does that actually mean? What if we were to allow for a marijuana establishment? What could we expect? Well, we don't really know. There's no crystal ball to guess at what kind of revenue these uses are going to generate, how many of them there's going to be in the state, what the numerator and the denominator and that formula are for how that revenue is distributed. But the Senate fiscal analysis for this, before it was voted into law by the voters, they took a look at the results from other states that have legalized marijuana. And based on their returns for their sales, they came up with these estimated numbers for the next few years. And you'll hear in the table we have at the top the revenues, so they're estimating the revenues, the regulation fund. So here they have how that's all broken down. And on this line, municipalities, they're estimating $27 million being distributed to municipalities by 2022-23. Again, we have no idea what that actually means for what Pleasant Ridge could see if we were to allow for establishments. Because we don't know how many retailers or micro businesses there would be in Pleasant Ridge. We don't know how many there would be in the state. We don't know if we even get one of those uses that generates tax revenue. So from a tax revenue perspective, again, it is too uncertain, and we cannot say with any degree of anything what that benefit to the city may be. And that concludes our overview. Those are the same issues that we have.
There you go.
So again, we'd be happy
Lots of
answering questions you have. I think as Greg talked about, December 6th is the bright red line. If the state doesn't get their act together and adopt their own rules for the regulation of these, it falls to the communities to be the sole licensing entity that has to deal with issuing licenses. So before that December 6th date, we have to decide if we're going to opt in by adopting ordinances or to opt out and to, for the time being or permanently, to not allow marijuana establishments within Pleasant Ridge. We can certainly change and amend those decisions down the road. We can always opt in at a later date after some of these things shake out and some of these unanswered questions become answered questions. So these are the things that we must consider going forward. So at this time, we have nothing before you for action or decision. We're looking for your guidance. We can bring this back at later meetings.
But I think just to say, I think that's the main point. I mean, there was obviously a lot of excitement on Facebook. At least people got engaged in. And I think the best service we can provide is continuously monitoring what's going on at the state as these things start to work their way through, and keeping people apprised of that. At least because we've talked about a schedule. If we have to make a decision one way or the other. And we're talking early fall to make that decision, and you kind of back up. So we're going to have to start getting serious about where we're going to go with this. But in the meantime, we want to continue to monitor, continue to get information out there, continue to ask for input. Yes, everybody would love that fancy, beautiful retail establishment sitting there at the corner of Sylvan and Oakland Park, or Sylvan and Woodward. But there are no guarantees, as was said. We don't know what's going on at the state, much less what kind of controls that we're going to be able to institute. So, a lot of people, just for people to know all the questions, all the unanswered questions right now, all the things that we're trying to monitor, and making sure that we let people know that we're trying to make the best decision, the most informed decision. And I think keeping people aware of this as they start thinking about what they would like to see. This is not, we know 74% of people voted yes for it, but again, there's a lot of people that, we love it, but I don't want it anywhere near me. I'm happy to go down to Ferndale to get my pot, or something like that. I just want to make sure that it's available recreationally. So I think it's just, we need to continue to monitor and continue to decide how we want to do this, but do it in a very informed way, with taxes and everything else being part of that decision. So.
Right.
Jim, do we know who, or Greg, do we know who helps answer and solve all these questions?
Well, some of them, as the rulemaking process goes forward, some of the specific details would work out, at least for the initial set of regulations. But a lot of these questions will require litigation at some point. A community will be challenged as to whether their ordinance is or is not unreasonably impractical. Communities can be challenged if they try to zone these as opposed to use a licensing ordinance. Given the supermajority requirement to amend, it's likely that litigation is going to be required to answer some of these questions. And there has been, some of the municipal attorneys have discussed perhaps having the prosecutors meet with the attorneys representing the marijuana industry to see if perhaps they can work out some of these through consensus. But it would take that kind of effort, I think, to overcome that 75% threshold for a legislative amendment. So likely, to answer your question, likely litigation would be required.
On that issue particularly, could the regulatory framework include some sort of language that protects communities some way from costly litigation? I mean, to me, some of the numbers we've talked about, you mentioned the Supreme Court, to me that's really prohibitive and against the spirit of what was passed. So if this is legal, but if cities want to bring this in as a legal business, they're gonna have to litigate it. In some cases, ours especially, right? We're not Southfield, we're not Troy, we're not the city of Detroit. Fight in court to defend something that we've legally in good faith passed would obviously be really harmful to our budget. So to me, it doesn't seem like, it seems like somewhere at the state level, and you can correct me if it's not, and we've kind of danced or talked about this, how it's unclear in the past, the act itself. Is there room in the regulatory framework to tamp down some of the litigious concerns?
Well, some of the issues that we talked about could perhaps be clarified by regulations, but regulations can be challenged just as local ordinance can. Right. So that simply because the Department of Licensing and Regulation adopts regulations doesn't mean it's immune from challenge. And even if we adopt an ordinance consistent with that, we could still be challenged. Certainly the way we implement it or the way we apply standards, even if they're standards that the state has come up with through the rulemaking process.
And as far as challenging any kind of ordinance we have or decision based on an ordinance we pass, as far as granting license, is that similar? I'm just in my head. Is that similar if, say, we have a code variance or we have something that nature and we rule against the applicant, or if there's an alcohol establishment and we deny that? Can they in those instances, is that kind of the same thing that we would be looking at here? Because I know we've passed a lot of variances or disapproved a lot of variance requests, and the thought was, well, this person's going to litigate this or challenge this. And would that be kind of the similar challenge that we would face?
The framework would be the same, man. You can't act in an arbitrary and capricious manner, which means if you have standards, you have to apply them.
Right.
If you don't, then you're subject to challenge.
Right.
Liquor licenses are a little different. You have broader discretion under the Liquor Control Act, grant or deny. It's certainly more discretion than you have under this statute.
Do you,
And with the-
yeah,
oh,
go
sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
With the variance question, that has been litigated extensively over the decades, to the point now where we have a lot of case law that establishes the courts have given us the criteria that's in every zoning variance request report you get, so that we are compliant with what's been established in the courts. So that's just, they have given us guidance that we now use.
Yeah,
Because
and that's a great
communities
point.
have spent a lot of money
Getting
challenging
there.
and defending, getting to that point.
Over decades.
Over decades,
Yes.
exactly.
No, I get that, and I appreciate that. But yeah, when we start talking, I mean, some of these numbers as far as challenging this obviously becomes something where we can't afford to do, and to me, that's not in the spirit that the law was passed.
Well, and for the smaller communities, they perhaps will hold back and see what the larger communities do. There are several communities in Michigan that have expressed interest in opting in. But even those that opt in, I mean, they will have to have their own standards, and those are subject to challenge as well. One other item that just amplifies a little bit the memo. As you know, marijuana remains illegal under federal law. At the confirmation hearing yesterday or today, the President's Attorney General nominee indicated that he would not go after, in essence, marijuana establishments in states where it's legal. That was the position of the Obama administration. Attorney General Sessions basically invalidated that, although not a lot of action was taken, but at least, of course, the gentleman, Mr. Barr, hasn't been confirmed, but at least that was his articulated position on enforcing federal law in states that have all allowed it. So.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor.
Otherwise, I was going to talk about the Attorney General.
I mean, we could elaborate on
No, we don't have to go there.
Thank you, Mayor. No, I really appreciate the time that Greg and Jim have spent on this. The report is kind of it's a very good synopsis of where we stand, and like Greg has said and Jim has indicated, it's kind of a moving target right now from Lansing. I'm hoping over the next couple months and into the fall that gets clarified somewhat. Jim referenced, and I would encourage anyone who's seriously considering the tax ramifications or the benefits of this to reference the Senate Fiscal Agency. This is from November, and it's a ballot proposal overview of the adopted language for the act. And in the back is the slide we had up, talks about how these taxes will be distributed. And to me, this really caught my eye, the distribution line for municipalities. And I would reference 2019, 2020, it starts out really low at $6.2 million. And up until 2022, like Jim mentioned, the $27 million estimate. We talked about this earlier. It's an amalgamation of some of the other states in the country who have had experience and kind of their revenue increases over time. Obviously, it's not an exact prediction, but an estimate. But part of what got me thinking is that if these numbers ramp up over time, to me, I see a benefit in Pleasant Ridge moving into the opt-in group earlier, because the number of communities who would be dividing up that sum, I anticipate would be lower than it would be 4 years and then the years after that. In 2019, 2020, if the estimate is $6.2 million, and let's say there's 50 businesses or communities who have allowed 50 businesses, 6.2 million divided 50 ways, I got $124,000. And if we go to the $27 million number, and let's say we multiply that by 10 times the $50 figure, and we're dividing $27 million between 500, that's still $54,000 a year of revenue that a community, based on their estimates, we'd be looking to. Now that could be much smaller, that could be higher, but still that's a significant chunk of money. And as was noted on the slide, that's in addition to the $5,000 fee that we could charge any establishments to operate in our community. So my worry is that the incentive to get in early is there. The return to cities as a share of this revenue goes down as more municipalities allow more businesses throughout the state. And my feeling is that if we were to get in early, we could take advantage of this revenue sharing in a way that maybe 10 years from now would be much more diluted. One of the examples that I read about in Colorado was a community adopted an ordinance, allowed the businesses to come in, and they developed a special fund that the community could see. These are the revenues that we're generating here, and they could actually comment and see where that money was being spent in the community. So where that need was, that money could go. My worry is that the fewer number of cities that are going to allow these businesses, obviously the split is going to be much greater. So my worry is that as that gets diluted over time, the incentive for us to participate decreases significantly. I did want to read, and this is something that I know we've talked about as far as smaller cities, because we're not Troy, we're not Detroit, we're not Lansing. So obviously our take is going to be smaller. But I found this article from the Denver Post, and it says marijuana sales tax revenue is a huge boon to Colorado cities. Now this was from 2 years ago, so these figures could go up, go down. I mean, it's a moving target, obviously, but this was from 2 years ago. And from the article it says, no matter the size of the community, retail marijuana has been, I didn't want to read this because they acknowledged it in the line as being a big hit. Boom. But for Mountain View, and I don't know if anyone has ever been to Mountain View, Colorado, but it's described as a 12-block enclave nestled among Wheat Ridge, Lakeside, and Denver. The extra revenue has been a godsend, no more for funding its budget through speeding tickets, which Mayor Jeff Kitty said is not true. The influx of cash is much needed. The town has 2 pot shops that both sell recreational and medical marijuana. It uses that revenue to take care of streets, alleys, and other improvements. We have such a small tax base, said Kitty, who originally opposed allowing pot stores in Mountain View. But he went on to say, medical and retail marijuana have definitely helped the town's bottom line. I'd be lying if I said it didn't. So, yes, I think it's uncertain. Yes, there's a lot of moving parts. And I really appreciate the mayor as far as, counseling on, hey, let's listen to everybody. Let's take our cues from Lansing, see what's going on there. But I personally really believe that we should allow the sale of marijuana in the city of Pleasant Ridge. And my preference would be that we work on crafting an ordinance ahead of time that our residents are comfortable with, and it's something that our business owners can use in a way that benefits not only their customers but the community. I really believe there's an avenue for us to do that, and I would hope over time we can get there. I'm fully on board with waiting and seeing what the state does, but I just want to verbalize my preference is that we do craft an ordinance to allow these businesses in our city. So, that's all I have.
Any other comments on the table?
Just a quick one. I think if we decide to wait until we understand how the state legislates the uses that are not medical, we're probably in a better position to do exactly what you said, understanding that there might be some potential loss in revenue associated with waiting. But at this moment, we just don't know where the state is going to go. We might write something that becomes completely invalid by what the state writes, and then we have to write it again.
And Brett, can I make a point too? And didn't we talk about the potential loss of money from litigation from being one of the first people to write?
Yes,
Greg?
He's studying his...
He's studying.
Absolutely. I mean, there will be challenges, there will be litigation, and communities that opt in first are going to face those issues, from the outset. So, and you can't predict how much it will cost. You can't really predict, because we don't even know what the regulatory scheme is. We don't really know where the areas of challenge
shooting in
are.
the
We
dark,
identified
basically.
some of them. But
Yes.
I was just figuring out how many marijuana establishments there were in Colorado right now. Right.
Well,
100.
in 2018, there was 509. I got that off the
Those are dispensaries, but then
Dispensaries.
Yes,
Yeah,
but then
it's
there's
not
another
all the other-
category
It's
of
not all classifications.
what they call grow facilities.
Right.
As well, there's several of those as well.
But the distribution is based on businesses, like Jim mentioned. It's not the growers or the processors. It's the tax revenue really comes from
Sales.
the sales. That's where you're going to see the revenue from, right? So
518 dispensaries, 322 Starbucks for comparison.
which is more damaging
What?
to society?
Wait,
it's-
seriously?
Seriously. Well, it's on the internet, so I'm not.
It must be true,
It's
right?
Okay,
The
well,
caveat.
Allegedly.
we will continue. We will keep an open mind, and we will continue.
To get
To monitor.
together
Thank you
information.
so
Yep,
much for
yep.
this
Thank you.
information,
Yes,
you
thank
guys.
you.
It was
Yep.
really
Thank you.
interesting.
And now we move from
we-
marijuana to liquor. What?
I was just gonna mention that the overview document was not in the packet because we weren't finished
Right, exactly.
polishing it.
Yeah.
So
It
I'll
is
put this on the website.
Cool.
Anyone who wants to read it. It's 6 pages of good stuff.
And Jim, is the Senate Fiscal Agency report? Is that
That's all in the packet.
That's in the packet.
I'll just create a post on the website and relink all of the documents there.
okay? Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, ordinance to amend Chapter 82 zoning of the Pleasant Ridge City Code, Section 82-197B9C, automobile service stations and oil change establishments, hours of operation. Before we open the public hearing, do you want to just give us?
Yes. This is an amendment to the zoning ordinance that would allow for our one existing seller of good old-fashioned alcohol to increase
Just
his
beer and wine.
beer and wine. Yes, no liquor. Sales hours which are currently limited to 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. It would allow Sunny to increase his sales of beer and wine at the Seneca station to 8 a.m. to midnight. The 9 a.m. to 10 p.m., which is a authority clearly decided that the cities have to regulate the hours of alcohol sales, is in our zoning ordinance right now. So expanding that requires an amendment. We did go back, and when this went to the Planning Commission, we went back and Chief Nowak looked back in the records, and in the 6 months that Sonny was selling beer and wine at the gas station, there was no appreciable change whatsoever in calls for service or runs to the gas station. It didn't really have any impact that we saw on the operation of the station, any kind of negative external offsite impacts. Through the public hearing process, we sent out mailed notice to property owners within 300 feet of the Sunoco station. If they were aware of any issues, I anticipate or I expect that we would have heard about them, and we mailed out the notice that they were expanding the hours. We heard nothing. So we have no communications or opposition or really any input on this change. So it's been through the public hearing process at the Planning Commission. The process for final adoption of the ordinance is for the City Commission to hold your public hearing tonight, and then you may act to make your final decision in the ordinance.
Okay. So any questions before we open the public hearing? All right. Open the public hearing. Anyone with any comments to be made?
I said it all.
You said it all.
All right, here we go.
Okay.
Rob Sackett, 8
Wasn't
Fairwoods.
necessary.
8 Fairwoods in support of it.
All right.
And after we get out of here at 11 o'clock, we're going to Sunny's.
Not yet, sorry.
Thank you.
Any other comments? All right. Close the public hearing. All right, do I have a motion to approve the change in the ordinance?
Mayor, I move the ordinance 434, amending Chapter 82 zoning of the Pleasant Ridge City Code, Section 82-197B, 9C, automobile service stations and oil change establishments, hours of operations be approved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? It's nice of you to sit so.
Oh,
But
oh, I did have
you did
one.
have discussion. Oh,
Yes, I'm sorry. I had one resident who had voiced to me a concern that he felt like the expanded hours, like going from 10 p.m. till midnight, that could pull in it could attract an element of people that maybe would cause trouble in the city and things like
it's that
that.
10 to 12 crowd.
I know, it's trouble.
That's a tough.
And he had asked and I think you had anecdotally told me, Sonny, that it was actually residents who sort of like asked, if you could expand your hours.
80% of my sales are probably to the local residents. And it's the residents that were asking me, like, oh, why is it 10 o'clock? Why can't we buy now? And that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
Convenient.
And so I thought that was,
Right there.
yeah, I thought it was a really good point that it was interesting. He had asked that exact question, which you had mentioned in the planning commission meeting, that it was something that was very much, you saw as a resident driven opportunity.
Correct.
So that's very cool.
Okay. Amy, may we have a vote, please?
Commissioner Perry?
Yes.
Commissioner Wall?
Yes.
Commissioner Krzysiak?
Yes.
Commissioner Scott?
Yes.
Mayor Metzger?
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
a long time coming, but finally.
He learned a lot
Thank
about
you.
marijuana.
No community garden.
Yeah.
Okay,
Maybe it'll increase the business.
just build another little.
More
That's
Cheetos.
right. More Cheetos.
Next item on the agenda, traffic calming manual and program introduction.
Yes. Hopefully, residents have heard that we're doing a traffic calming town hall next week.
Tuesday. I can't believe it's next
Yeah.
week.
6:30 p.m. at Fort Ridge. Come see the new big room. Stick around for the discussion on traffic calming.
Back to work, Sonny.
Traffic calming is probably the most consistent issue that comes up. Drivers on my street are cars go too fast, etc. We hear it all over town from all streets. And it's something that we've been working on proactively on a few streets in town. We've been collecting data and we've been trying to put some rigor and method around this process to guide our efforts. So in light of that, we have a traffic calming manual, which establishes a formal traffic calming process. It also sets forth what some of the techniques are that we can use and how we implement those on various streets. All the data collection we've done, Pleasant Ridge streets are safe. Some more than others, but all of them are safe. Improvements can always be made. And we'll talk about some of those things that we've done. But traffic calming, there's a very real reason to do it. In the manual, we go through this a little bit more, but this is the chart that probably sums it up the best, is that if you're hit by a car at 20 miles an hour, that's sort of equivalent to falling out of a tree, falling 12 feet out of a tree. That's the same speed of impact that you would have at 20 miles an hour. You have a 5% chance of death, you have a 30% chance of being uninjured and walking away, and then a 65% chance of maybe a trip to the emergency room, but generally being fine. Once you increase to 30 miles an hour, and this is because with impacts, the result of those is quadratic. So every increase has a fourfold severity jump. So by the time you go from 20 to 30 miles an hour, now you've got a 45% chance of death and only a 5% chance of walking away shaken but unhurt. And then when you get up to 40 miles an hour, the numbers are real bad. So there's a very real reason why 20 miles an hour is a speed limit that makes the most sense for residential streets. And I'll say right up front that I would love to do 20 mile an hour speed limits on streets, but state law restricts us to only being able to go down to 25 miles an hour. That's the lowest level that state law lets you assign as a speed limit. But state law doesn't restrict how we can design our streets. And part of the purpose of traffic calming is to rethink and redo how we design our streets, because driving is psychology. Drivers go how fast they feel comfortable driving behind the wheel. And this is a chart that's put out by NACDO, the city transportation officials group. It's more urban-based transportation officials as opposed to your standard AASHTO, which is American Association of Highway Officials, basically. And they came out of the faster, farther, easier line of thinking for designing streets, and that goes all the way back to the 30s, where there were no standards for designing local streets. There was no agreed upon manual. So the only manual at that time in the 30s when they were looking to do that was the interstate highway design standards. So all of our design standards for local collector streets, urban streets, are basically mini interstates. And the presumption there is that we need to move traffic fast and far. So NACTO twists that and takes a more design and city-based street approach, where the street is an actual place, not just a conduit between two other places. And they put out these graphics. So when you're driving 15 miles an hour, the point here is this is your cone of vision. This is what you see and can perceive and react to while you're driving 10 or 15 miles an hour. The faster you start to go, the more focused you are, and your peripheral vision starts to narrow, and you don't see really what's going on over here. And then when you go to 30, 35, it gets even smaller. You don't even see these pedestrians who are in the street already. And that's the very real impact of driver speeds on safety in an urban place. And Pleasant Ridge, for intents and purposes of street design, is an urban place. So what is traffic calming? It's using environmental cues to influence driver behavior. We know that street design influences driver behavior. There's three elements to a street. There's the design speed. That's what the engineers put together when they're designing the street and how they choose the various design elements and choices they make. There's the posted speed, and that's what the speed limit on the street is, presumably, or that's what the community, what we say we want people to drive. And then there's operating speed. That's the speed the cars actually drive at. And traditionally, this is coming again from the highway model, the design speed is usually higher than the posted speed to provide what I put in quotes, a safety cushion. And I've listened to traffic engineers, I won't call them transportation engineers, there's a difference. I've sat in meetings and rooms with traffic engineers say, well, we design the streets at 5 or 10 miles an hour faster so that when the driver makes an error, they have a chance to react and correct their error before they hit a tree or something else. But all that does is widens everything out and encourages people to drive faster. So what we find is that operating speed usually equals design speed. And you see it on our streets. When the data that's later in the presentation in the traffic calming manual from what we've gathered on our streets is that the 85th percentile operating speed on our streets is usually right around 30 miles an hour, which incidentally is also the design speed for all of our streets, because the 25 mile an hour presumed speed limit plus that 5 mile an hour safety cushion, which is a safety cushion for drivers to not hit a tree or something. It's not a safety cushion for anyone riding their bike or living next to the street. That's what the street's designed for. So our residential streets, we have parking on one side of the street. Typically on a normal street, it's 27 feet wide, so that leaves you 7 feet for the parking lane and then 20 feet for 2-lane travel in each direction. So our streets are designed to allow for 35 mile an hour or 30 mile an hour unimpeded flow. So when you pass another car on a residential street, nobody has to slow down. Drivers don't have to be inconvenienced by pulling over, waiting, or yielding. And when we all get in our car, none of us want to do that. We put on our car brain and it's, I want to get out of here as fast as I can and I don't want to stop for anything. But that's not maybe the greatest environmental cues to send to drivers. And that's a big part of why people drive the way they do in our streets. So the traditional approach, design speed is greater than the posted speed. The operating speed ends up equaling the design speed, and the operating speed is higher than your posted speed. Traffic calming approach, we change the design speed of the street to equal the posted speed. Or we could even take it further, and instead of equaling the posted speed, we could set a target speed. We could even say that we want traffic on the street to go 20 miles an hour, even though the posted speed limit is 25, and then we design to that 20 mile an hour threshold. Then we make sure that our operating speed equals that design speed, and then the operating speed will equal the posted or the target speed. And it's changing driver behavior through design. So limitations legally that we work under, we can only set a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. The Michigan Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices is a 600 or 800 page document developed by the Federal Highway Transportation Authority over decades. Michigan has adopted that as law. So that puts limitations on signs and other traffic control methods we can use. This really is traffic control. It's signs, it's laws we pass. It's not about street design. It's about the signs and what we put on the side of the road telling drivers what to do. Sort of haranguing them, but not addressing the underlying issue. We also have design manuals. The AASHTO Green Book, that's the American Association for State Highway, used to be traffic engineers, and then they changed it to transportation officials. I think they were trying to improve their image, but that's the old Interstate Highway Manual that over the last 80 years has been reworked and amended a number of times. We also have NACTO design guides, which I think for an urban community like Pleasant Ridge should be the default that we use. So those design manuals set forth all of the accumulated design wisdom we have for how you accomplish these things. So when we talk about design speed, what are the factors that influence how drivers behave? Well, lane width. We know that wider lanes encourage higher speeds. If you're driving on the interstate at 80 miles an hour, you have a 12-foot wide lane. And oftentimes we have 12-foot wide lanes on 9-mile and urban streets. And there's no need for us to have a lane you can drive 80 miles an hour in an urban environment. So there's a correlation between reducing lane widths and lowering speed. Ridge Road is an example of that. When we put in the edge stripes, that was to visually narrow the street to minimize or reduce the width of the street. Ridge is 26 feet wide. That's effectively two 13-foot wide lanes. So we just addressed that issue with some paint. Number of lanes, the more lanes you have, the higher speed you get. That's why when you drive down Oakland Park, where you've got 20 feet on each side of the median island, and very few people park their cars on Oakland Park, you effectively have two-lane streets on Oakland Park. Encourages speeding. And we do see some higher speeds on Oakland Park than some of our other residential streets. Curb radiuses, we talked about this when we were discussing the bump outs at the corners at Oakland Park, but the larger curb radii you have, the faster and easier it is for a car to go around that corner at speed. The best example of this is turning off of Woodward on the main street, where you have a very wide curb radius, and you can go around that turn at 60 miles an hour and not blink an eye. But here we've got 25 or 30-foot curb radiuses at Oakland Park. You can drive around that at very high speeds. Oftentimes you'll see 5 or 10-foot curb radiuses in urban environments where you have to actually slow down and be careful turning around the corner. A good example of that is the intersection right down the street from Oakland Park at Cambridge and Ridge, particularly if you're coming eastbound on Cambridge from west of Ridge. It's a very narrow curb radius turning onto Ridge Road South. I encourage anyone to drive onto Oakland Park and make the turn, and then go make the turn from Cambridge right-hand south onto Ridge. It's a very tighter curb radius. You go a lot slower and you take a lot more care going around there. So that's just a right here local example that's 600 feet apart of how that curb radius does influence behavior. And then straight street segments. Straight segments without horizontal deflection, and horizontal deflection is just any kind of bend, shift, turn, narrowing you have, encourage higher speeds. And that's where the island we put in at Roosevelt School, it's intended to slow traffic down there because that's a horizontal deflection that at that location where there's a crosswalk requires you to slow down a little bit, take a little more care while you're driving. So when we talk about traffic calming elements, typically there's two kinds, horizontal and vertical. Horizontal is anything that constricts the width of the street, creates deflections. Vertical elements are bumps, humps, or tables that require vehicles to slow down at a specific point because you're popping up and down over it. And so in the manual we identify a number of these techniques that have been used. We have chicanes, which if you ever follow racing, auto racing of any kind, you know what a chicane is, but it's where you have to swerve and do a little curve in the street. And this is an example where they've created on an otherwise straight street, but they've added in two islands that move traffic. So when you're driving down the street, you have to take a little bend and then back, and it causes you to naturally slow down through that area. You can do mini roundabouts. Typically these are at the intersection of a four-way intersection. And you can put a little island in there, and again, it just causes a driver to deflect a little bit when they go through there, so you have to slow down as you go through the intersection, control speeds through the intersection. Chokers and pinch points, it's a narrowing of the street. This one is about 1.5 lanes wide, so it would force a yield condition here, where if you have two cars coming in opposite directions, one of them would have to stop and wait. And this is just done with a little island and some landscaping within the existing street. And so a chicane just takes these and offsets them. A pinch point puts them right across from each other. The related cousin of the pinch point is a center median, which puts that in the middle of the street and separates the lanes on either side. In a crosswalk, this is useful because you can cross here, you have a safety refuge, and then you cross here, and it naturally slows traffic down through that intersection. Bike lanes and paint. So on Ridge, we added the edge stripes, which narrow visually the street, create some, we can't call them official bike lanes because we didn't have enough width to create an officially sanctioned bike lane, but they're something that people use as a bike lane unofficially, which is a good thing. And then we added the sign. It's another element that just helps improve some safety at the crosswalk.
Jim, can I just ask on that back? Yeah. Why not a center line?
There's actually research that shows when you add center lines make people drive faster. Because a center line is another environmental behavioral cue that this is my space and I can go as fast as I want here. It's actually better to do narrower. So here we have 19 feet, so that's two 9.5 foot wide lanes. And then with no center line, it slows traffic even more.
Yeah.
And there's research that tested that out and showed that.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so you really only want to have a center line on truly busy streets. You don't want to have center lines on residential or moderate volume streets like Ridge, where we have 4,000 cars a day. You don't want to need a center line.
Okay, thank you.
Corner bump outs. And this is at an intersection where you just add some little bump outs that, again, it's a pinch point, but it's at a corner. And it narrows the crossing, provides a pedestrian with a little extra space for refuge. It lessens the space a pedestrian has to cross. It causes cars to stop and pay attention at the intersection where here there's a stop sign. So you'll get more people not rolling that. And then you have the easiest and cheapest solution that everyone always balks at because this will actually cause them inconvenience while they're driving. But if you allow parking on both sides of the street, you can naturally create every single one of those previous methods except for the median island because you don't want to park in the middle of the street.
Right.
But you can create all of those other traffic calming elements naturally just by parking cars and letting people park on both sides of the street. Pleasant Ridge had parking on both sides of the street until the early 90s when no parking on one side of the street was enacted. And this creates a yield street situation because two cars cannot pass each other where you've got cars parked across the street. Cars that are parked on opposite sides of the street cause you to move and have to, sort of breathe back and forth as you drive down the road, which makes you pay attention to your surroundings a little bit more. And all of these things will slow traffic down on the street. The best part about this is you don't have to put in any concrete, you don't have to do any public works, you don't have to worry about any kind of drainage, you don't have to worry about any kind of maintenance. You take away the no parking signs and it's free. So what I always suggest whenever anyone says traffic on my street is crazy, I say, okay, well, it's all parking on both sides of the street. That will absolutely slow it down. Oh no, I don't want that.
And you know what too? Jim, can I just make a point? You could always, if people really hated it on the street, you could always reverse it. That's the great part. There's no cost. It's not a big risk.
Yes. So to any resident out there that wants on their street to get together and with their neighbors say that, yeah, we want to try this out. We'll bag those no parking signs and we'll test this because it's free.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim, quick question, if I may. Is there a higher fender bender rate on parking on both sides, or has there been any research? People run into cars more, or do they slow down enough to pay attention?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's many towns that still allow parking on both sides of the street and have this. Ferndale has many streets that
right down
have this.
Forest, right at the end of our street.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can see where Maplefield turns into Forest and Oak Park, and all of a sudden there's cars parked on both sides of the street. So I don't think that I'm not aware of any increase.
I was just curious.
Incidents of that.
Do we know why Pleasant Ridge surrendered that as an option?
There's only two reasons I can surmise. I don't have any data or reasoning or discussion from the early 90s when this was done. It was either done, one, at the insistence of the fire marshal, who oftentimes want that free, you know, and you can have fire routes. Ferndale has fire routes where there's parking on one side of the street. So that's one, you know, thing you have to take into consideration. The other thing could have been just people wanted to be able to drive faster, because when we get in our cars, we don't want to be slowed down, but when we get out of our cars, we want everyone else to slow down. So, you know, it's that constant sort of tension we have.
Right.
Well, and Jim, I remember when you first mentioned it, I was violently opposed to that idea, because I had, immediately I had thought of how densely some streets are that you see parked like on both sides. But then you made the very good point that it's like, we're not going to add a lot of streets to the cars to the street. It's still going to be the same amount.
Right.
They'll just be scattered on each
Because
side of the
everybody,
street.
right now, everyone who's going to park on the street parks on one side of the street. So it's not like you're going to double the amount of cars you have on the street.
Right.
You might increase it by 10%.
Right.
But you're not going to double it. You're going to take a lot of those cars that are on this side of the street and distribute them differently.
Very chicaney.
Yes. Create chicanes, pinch points, corner bump outs, the whole shebang.
Well, you mentioned how Pleasant Ridge is an urban street environment, right? That's how you would classify the design of our streets. If you go to other urban areas, I think you find, you know, I think of Hamtramck. You know, I don't know if you drive the streets in Hamtramck, but
You drive them slow.
oh my gosh, incredibly slow. One, the streets are narrow, and two, they have parking on both sides of the street. So yeah, the speed volumes through there.
Plus, they have housing right up to the curb.
Right.
You know,
There's
that
a lot
also,
of visual.
That also the visual cues that keep slow you down.
Right.
Right.
Birmingham's a great example, because this is in Birmingham, this photograph
okay.
here.
Right.
So Birmingham allows parking on both sides of their streets. So, you know, if you want to maybe a more peer community for Pleasant Ridge for how it might actually shake out, go drive around Birmingham's residential streets.
Sure.
And, you know, there's not a ton of cars parked in this photo. You can see there's, you know, 1, 2, 3, and then one down in the distance. You know, we're not going to have a Hamtramck situation where they don't have garages and driveways. We're going to have a Birmingham situation where you get a nice sort of distribution of the cars that's not real densely packed.
And you
and
still
then-
can't put lawn chairs.
I love that.
Reserve your parking.
Yeah,
Right.
to reserve your spot. Yeah.
Chicago.
Yeah.
No,
put
but-
put a lawn chair out there.
And it does make a lot of sense to try that on some of the busier streets.
Right.
What about leaf pickup? I mean, do you see that being an issue if we had?
Right now, we fight the cars parked on all one side of the street.
Yeah.
So, you know, as with anything, you just have more. And we've been trying to get people to stop parking in the street, you know, when leaf pickup occurs. But you would just distribute the cars differently.
Okay.
You know, if you do allow parking on both sides of the street, you know, is it time to enforce a snow emergency ordinance where you can't park on the street? Maybe. You know, that might be something we have to do. But, you know, these are minor inconveniences at a few specific points in the year versus the traffic calming benefit you'd get every day. So this is really applicable on the majority of our residential streets. There's 4 streets that I would identify that this might be a little more difficult because of volumes, traffic volumes. These are, you know, for bicyclists, the nice thing about not having parking on both sides of the street is that, you know, you can ride your bike and cars have a way to get around you. It's a little more comfortable for riding your bike. On most of our streets, the traffic volumes we have are 600 cars a day or lower. It's not a big deal to ride your bike down most of our streets if cars are parked on both sides. It's not going to be uncomfortable on most of our streets. But some of those streets, we might have to look at some different approaches. Okay, so vertical elements, speed humps. We hear a lot of desire to put these in. These are maybe one of my least favorite methods because if you live near a speed hump, it's actually really terrible. Because what you hear is of cars going over it all day, every day. You hear cars going to slow down, to go over it, then as they drive away from it. It does cause some impacts for the people who live around it. A lot of these other traffic calming methods, what you find is people coast down to them and then accelerate away more smoothly. The other thing about speed humps is that if you really are going to use these along the street to slow down traffic to a speed you want, one, speed humps slow you down to about 20 miles an hour, maybe 18. And they really only have that traffic calming impact for 100 to 150 feet on either side of the hump. So you're talking 2 or 3 houses, maybe 4 or 5 houses at which traffic speeds are going to be lower. Then you have to do another one, then you have to do another one, if you're really looking to slow traffic down on an entire street. So speed humps are something that have an application, but it's really better at a specific point where you need traffic to slow down at that point.
Okay.
But you can also use chicanes and median islands to slow traffic down at that point without some of the drawbacks of speed humps. And then you also have the fact that snowplows have to deal with these and drive over them. And we have concrete streets, and most speed humps that are put in are asphalt. So now we've been putting asphalt on top of a concrete street, which you don't see as often, and often doesn't work, and often has maintenance issues with it. So there are some impacts with this. If you want to try it out, go to Ferndale on one of the streets that they've put in the speed humps. Just look at your speed once you're about 3 houses away from that speed hump. You're back to what you would have been going anyways, I think. And then the last thing we have is active signs. Signs are not traffic calming, but these active signs actually do have a traffic calming benefit. This is like the radar speed sign that we put up on Ridge Road. And this is something that we can use on other higher volume streets where we want to enforce the 25 mile an hour speed limit a little bit better. When we put in the median island, when we narrowed Ridge Road, when we did the crosswalk striping, when we put in the radar speed sign, and we had the center island out there, we effectively reduced speeds on Ridge by about 7 miles an hour. So the average speed went down about 5 miles an hour, but that was to the pre-reconstruction. So that's before we redid Ridge Road. And what we find is that when you redo a street, traffic generally speeds up by 2 miles an hour because it's smoother. So that's what we accomplished on Ridge. So what isn't traffic calming? Stop signs. We can talk about this in much more detail. I'm not going to tonight. Stop signs absolutely are not traffic calming. They're intersection control. Road closures, that just changes how traffic's distributed and creates very big winners and losers. And then enforcement isn't traffic calming. Enforcement will slow traffic down for a while. There's the halo effect. Once the police are gone, then drivers go right back to driving at the speed they feel comfortable. So these things address the symptoms. They do not address the cause. So none of these are all Band-Aids. None of them are true traffic calming measures. Traffic calming works 24/7, 365 because it changes behavior. So how are we doing this process? We've done traffic calming on Ridge. We're looking at doing traffic calming on other streets in town that meet one of two criteria, either a volume higher than 2,500 vehicles per day, or where the 85th percentile speed is greater than 32 miles an hour. And these are based on specific areas where there's a significant, we'll also look at traffic calming implementations in areas that don't meet those two criteria, but where there may be some significant safety hazard for pedestrians or bicyclists. So the streets that meet the volume or speed criteria are Ridge, Woodward Heights, Oakland Park, and Oxford. And it makes sense because those are the streets that people funnel to. If you're driving to get to Woodward, you go to Oakland Park or Oxford, depending on the time of day and where you're going. If you're coming into or if you're passing through Pleasant Ridge, many people, as we know, turn off of Woodward, go over to Ridge, and continue either to their destination in Pleasant Ridge or south into Ferndale, Oak Park, and points beyond. And Woodward Heights serves that same function on the east side. Other streets, Millington and Sylvan, have higher than average volumes, but they're both at around 1,100 cars per day. Not the 2,500 cars per day that Oxford or Oakland Park sees, or the 3,000 cars a day that Woodward Heights, or the 4,000 cars a day that Ridge see. And Oxford actually also has about 1,100 cars per day, but they have high speeds. So the speed issue is there.
How many on Oakland Park?
25 to 2,800 per day.
Okay.
And Millington was low.
Millington was 1,100 per day. So those are our 4 collector streets, or the streets that see traffic impact from all of the residents of Pleasant Ridge, because we tend to funnel to those streets and drive on them, so all of us impact the traffic on those streets. The rest of the streets in the city are all very similar in their volumes and speeds. And those are what we would call local streets, where really most of the traffic is generated by the people who live on that street. the city, we are looking at doing traffic calming projects, at designing and funding and implementing them by the city using our city funding. Because collectively, we should all use city funding from taxes and other benefits, other funding sources that the city gets to address the traffic issues that we all create. On the other streets in town where speeds are lower, volumes are lower, but if residents do want to implement traffic calming on those streets, what we're proposing and what other communities have done is that we can have a resident-initiated process where we'll take a petition, and in the first draft of the manual, this is all open for discussion. But we said 66% of households on the street, not residents, not persons, 66% of households have to sign on to a petition asking the city to look at traffic calming options. We would look at some options based on the conditions on that street that might make sense, along with costs to implement those. We'll meet with the residents to determine the desired course of action at a meeting. We can field test the options. You remember on Bridge, we field tested a number of these things before we made them permanent. And then we can vote with and then the residents would vote to make these options permanent or not. And what goes along with that is we do a special assessment district to the residents of that block to pay for those improvement costs. Because it would be hard to, for me, it would be hard to justify saying that, okay, well, Maplefield wants traffic calming, even though the speed and volume profile is no different than any other street. So now the city's going to pay for those, and residents on Hanover should pay for Maplefield's traffic calming, even though they've got the same traffic profile.
Makes sense.
So this is an approach that other communities have used. Some other communities split this up a little bit differently, where the city sets aside $25,000 a year for these types of projects, and then streets can do a 50-50 cost match, and the city will pay out of that set aside until that money's gone. So there's a number of ways we can approach this, but for the purposes of the first draft of the document, we put in there that we just do the special assessment. So this is something that we would need to discuss. And then this is just the data we've collected from streets thus far. So I'll just point out a couple things. Ridge Road, and there's a number of Ridge Road measurements. We've taken these near Oakland Park and then near the school. And we've taken these at different points when we were testing out different things to see what the impact was. But Ridge Road is typically between 3,600 and 4,800 cars per day, depending on where you're at. And the volume south of Cambridge at the boundary with Ferndale is higher. So that points to the fact that people are using Ridge coming in and out of Ferndale and points south, funneling to that street. Oakland Park has that 2,600 to 2,800 cars per day. Their 85th percentile speed is 32 miles an hour. Average speed is about 28. Oxford, lower volumes, higher speeds. They're about 32 miles an hour. And then Woodward Heights has 2,800 cars per day. This was taken a few years ago. This past summer with the 696 construction, volumes were up. But I expect it will probably return back down to about this number. And then the 85th percentile speed is pretty typical on Woodward Heights along with other streets. So it's really a volume issue on Woodward Heights more than a speed issue, but we can still improve that speed. We have 2,800 cars a day going 28 miles an hour. It's different than 500 cars a day going 28 miles an hour down your street.
I'm sorry, Jim, what did you say were the Woodward Heights volumes during this year?
This year it was about 3,400 cars per day.
Oh, okay.
It's not on the sheet.
No, that's not in here because that wasn't a traffic count that we took.
Okay.
TIA gathered that when they were doing this, when they were working on the stop sign evaluation. So that's the somewhat abbreviated overview. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. The process is we're going to have the traffic calming town hall meeting where we'll present this all again next week, specifically to residents for Ridge, 6:30 p.m. We're going to be doing a special meeting immediately following. We're just going to segue into a Woodward Heights specific portion of the meeting where we're going to present some options that we've been working on that we can test out on Woodward Heights for traffic calming, speed control, volume, maybe volume control. If you make the street a little harder to drive down, we can hopefully deflect some of the cut-through traffic. We'll be presenting that and having that discussion with Woodward Heights residents also at that meeting. But the first portion of the meeting will be on the traffic calming guide and program in general. After that meeting, we'll take any kind of input we get. We'll be bringing this back to the City Commission. Eventually, this will be a document that we'll be asking you to adopt as the official city policy. So we'll be discussing this at future meetings and at the town hall meeting with the residents next week. Good. And we'll proceed with refining this and getting it to a point you're comfortable with. So happy answering questions you have.
Questions? Any more questions from the...
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, no, I was really grateful to see the thought that was put into the implementation methods and differentiating between city-initiated projects and resident-initiated projects. I think that's very exciting, and I'd like to highlight that for residents as far as we're going to look at this from a macro level and how we can lower speeds citywide. That's what this document primarily is looking at. But I think the guide, and I compliment you on it, it does a really good job of laying out the options. So if residents of a particular street want to look through this, talk to their neighbors and be like, you know what, this might work for us. The city has laid out how we can do that. Let's see if there's support. I think that's a fabulous way to get residents kind of involved and thinking of this in constructive ways. And so I really applaud you for putting that into this document, because that's something that I personally really want to see is, hey, if residents feel this is that important, they can, there's steps they can take. You've laid it out. It's laid out in the document itself. I know we talked about the cost sharing on this and whether it makes sense to have the residents of that particular street bear the full cost of that. My thinking is a little different on that. I would like to see either cost sharing between the city and the residents, or some sort of fund set up to fund these type projects, perhaps with a marijuana tax. No? Okay. All right. But there could be a fund that we budget for $25,000, $15,000 a year for projects like this. Because I just think for a resident group to bring this on themselves, and then they're going to incur assessed costs for this. You know, some streets have more residents than others. Some streets have less. I just feel like throwing that on the residents might be prohibitive on its face. So I know this is a first draft of the document. I really would advise residents to weigh in on that component, because it is something that this body is deliberating on. And if you have an opinion one way or the other, that would be helpful to weigh in on this. The one thing I did want to say, and this is also highlighted in the document, is that to be effective, street control measures need to be supported by the residents along the street. That's in part of the petition process, but I also believe that overall, even if it's an initiated project from the city, we really need to have residents buy in to the solutions that we're implementing on their streets. I think this meeting that we've scheduled for the 22nd, I've been on this board for 7 years. I don't know if we've ever had a meeting like that where we've asked residents, hey, this is how we're going to address an issue. Everyone's concerned about traffic and speeds. Let's all come together and talk about it. So I'm really excited about the 22nd. I know the commissioners went out this weekend and walked Woodward Heights. I think for the few people who answered their doors, I don't know if it was me or what, but maybe you guys got better. No. Maybe it's that ring thing. People were like, who's this weird guy on my porch? Brett and I walked.
Let's hope they show up on Tuesday.
Yeah, but some of the resident feedback we did get, I was glad to hear that they've noticed since 696 has been open, just anecdotally, they've seen some of the traffic volumes relax a little bit. So my hope is that the combination of 696 being open again and the city being proactive and working with the residents, that we can really get a grasp on these long-standing issues. And yeah, I would just encourage anyone to, one, look through this manual. Jim did a fabulous job laying this stuff out. But also, please, on the 22nd, if you can be there, or somebody from your street can be there, maybe you draw lots, I don't know, but I really encourage everyone to participate in this meeting, because, like I said, I can't remember a time where we've really asked residents on a specific issue to come together and join us in this way. So, on the 20th. Yeah. So.
Any other comments? Okay, well, we look forward to next Tuesday night, 7 o'clock?
6:30.
6:30. I just tested you.
I love it.
6:30. Next item on the agenda is city manager's report.
I think we've talked about most of the things that are upcoming. We talked about Chariot, unfortunate.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have nothing further.
Cool. Did anybody have any questions for the city manager? All right. Okay, moving on. Other business. Who wants to start? Other business.
He wants to.
He wants
I don't
You got
have to
something? You got
always
other
start if
business? You got
somebody's
other
got
business?
something else.
Let's get other business.
And
I can't think of anything.
well, I'll just do a book introduction real quick. This is Shark's Fin and Szechuan Pepper, a sweet and sour memoir of eating in China by Fuchsia Dunlop. This will actually be the January book. We're meeting tomorrow, so if you're interested in reading this, get cracking.
Wow.
It's a memoir of her time spent in China, sampling the food. It's one of several food-related books we've read recently, but it came highly recommended. So this is tomorrow, but I wanted to get everyone a head start on February. This is The Underground Railroad, a movement that changed America by Evelyn Milstein. And I know we've talked about the Fago. Mentioned the Fago book earlier.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be the author's going to be presentation for that book, so that's really exciting. The Coney, they also did the Coney
Detroit
book,
Coney, yep.
which is
he'll be selling both books.
Yeah, will he be selling Conies?
Yeah. No, I don't think he's bringing Conies, but unless we fix them, maybe we'll have Conies along.
Maybe we'll bring some.
There will be Fago, I know.
Well, looking forward to that. This is local author Evelyn Milstein, and she's agreed to join the PR Book Club in February to discuss the Underground Railroad, a movement that changed America. So that will be February 20th at 7 o'clock at the Community Center, Underground Railroad with Evelyn Milstein on the 20th of February. I hope you can make it.
And I just wanted to take a couple minutes. This is not something I normally do, but after going to the funeral today and thinking about Eugene Kepler, I just wanted to make a couple comments. He was one of our more unique residents, and he passed away this past weekend. And I thought that Bradford Parks posted something on Facebook that I felt was so well written I didn't see any need to rewrite it. So I just wanted to read this as just a final comment. My friend and neighbor Eugene Kepler passed away yesterday at the age of 68. If you couldn't get your snowblower started, he would start it and talk your ear off while doing it. If there were leaves in the street making everything look ugly, he would rake them up. If you wanted to know what it was like in the Grande Ballroom in Detroit seeing every band ever in the 60s, he could tell you. He showed me how to put in an electrical outlet and not die, and how to lay in a wood floor. He would give you the shirt off his back, and sometimes you would wish he would put that shirt back on. He loved his wife and daughters and remodeled a house for one daughter from scratch. He is doing pool laps in the sky now, and I will miss him very much. Anybody who hung out with Eugene or was at the pool know him quite well, and we will all miss him next summer for sure. So, anything else? If there's nothing else, I will ask, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
You're-
Think about it.